This video discusses how you would pay a traffic source in the offer setup. Now, the buyer payout or revenue to you, buyer revenue, is always set up in the buyer record. So as you're trying to configure how much you get paid and when you forward calls to your buyers, that's handled in the buyer configuration under the conversion settings. However, on the offers, where you're going to handle what you pay to your traffic sources. So I'm going to go ahead and edit the offer we've been working on and go to traffic source payouts. Now in here, typically what's going to happen is you're doing advertising on your own most of the time, but if you're only buying from other people, you'd be setting up your payouts here. So the payouts typically are covered 24/7 when you're paying your publishers, just like when you're getting paid from a buyer. Usually it's one payout all day long, but we do allow you to day part this in case you are paying a publisher at different times of the day for different amounts. So for example, on a medical rehab offer, if you need to pay them a lower price or take longer to convert a call between midnight and 5 a.m. and 9 p.m. and midnight, for example, you could set up a day parting of the traffic source payouts. But typically the payouts are 24/7 and you leave it this way. Now in here I'm going to add my conversion criteria. So let's say I'm going to put in default payout internal traffic. Now I might be putting in here that I am paying $0 to Google AdWords, Bing, whatever. So my internal traffic that I'm paying for the traffic, I'm not paying for calls. I might still say that I'm going to measure my performance, that a unique caller I only measure for 30 days. Or I could do it less, but typically 30 days for most offers. But if you're trying to measure the exclusivity of the your traffic for 1 week, that's what you put in duplicate time frame there. Duplicate time frame basically means when the same caller ID is being involved, how long between conversions do we actually let it convert? Okay. The duration is how many seconds that you're going to say that the call could convert for. So if it's forwarded to the buyer for at least 60 seconds, I'm going to call that conversion. So since I'm putting this in as default internal traffic, great. Okay, so now I'm doing my own advertising, I got that set up. But now I have a traffic source that's actually going to send me calls. So I add the payout conversion criteria. I come in and say maybe traffic sources at $10 for 120 seconds for a 30-day dedupe. Right, so that's what I'm saying. My traffic source is at that price. I'm going to pay dollars. I'm going to pay them $10, and it'd be great if my buyers are only duping me for 30 days, but I get the publishers to agree to 60. That's fantastic. There'll be times where you're getting calls that come in, they go to buyers, and you get paid for them. However, the traffic source isn't getting paid because it's in between the 30 and 60 days that they already sent you the call. Kind of nice stuff. And again, if I can make their duration longer than my buyers, always great. So if I tell my publishers, I got an offer here, you get paid at 2 minutes, but then I go to my buyers and I say, hey, I'd like to get some 10-second, 30-second, 60-second, 90-second, 2-minute durations, all those ones shorter than 2 minutes, you're going to come out ahead. Now, some common filters you might put on would be that you're going to filter the payout to them maybe if the buyer converted. So I click on this predefined token here and I say I'm going to pay you publisher, but only if my buyer converted me. So maybe the buyer called it a dupe and he's on TrackDrive and it determines that you're not going to get paid, then the publisher also wouldn't get paid and it would be called a dupe. Okay. There's other things that might happen in here. So let's say I do have in here, sorry, I forgot to filter for traffic sources, which would make more sense. So I'm saying that this Janet Yeager is the person sending me calls. So I put in Janet Yeager there, and again update that. Now again, it's all positional related, so I have to make sure that the blank filtered conversion settings are always at the bottom. We are making a mod shortly. At the time I'm making this video, it doesn't exist yet, but all actions that are positional related that have no filters will trickle down to the bottom automatically, because it makes no sense to have a no filter one above one with filters. Again, when the call ends, it come down. It checked to see did the buyer convert. Now we do always check to see if the buyer converts before we come back to the offer config to see if the traffic source converts. Just know that. So we're going to go ahead and check the buyer converted to be true, and also check to make sure it's Janet Yeager. If it isn't that, it comes down here to the default and just pays across this. And in this case, there's no payout, so you don't see a dollar figure here. So that's how you set things up. Now you could have a situation where you're paying differently by state. That does happen. So let's say I come in here, and this is my default for Janet. She's going to get paid $10. Now I didn't show you this here. You could also pay people a percentage of revenue. So let's say I do have the, if I add a new payout criteria and I say traffic sources on rev share, I come here and say I'm going to pay by a percentage. I give them 75% of the deal. I still duplicate them as high as I can. And the duration doesn't really matter here because we're going to get paid on a percentage of revenue. But I could put in a duration saying, yeah, you're going to get paid on a percentage of revenue, but you still have to reach the 120-second duration. So what would happen is if the buyer was paying me at 30 seconds and he did convert, I wouldn't give a percentage of this revenue to the publisher because they still have to reach their 120-second duration. Okay, so that's another way to do it. Then we'd filter that and say, okay, these traffic sources here, this guy, well, that wouldn't be a good example because they're not a real person, but Jerry Jones and Rich Nolan, they both are paid on rev share, and so I'm going to come in here and set that up, and again it has to be in the right position, so just to make sure it's above my default one. Okay, so now I would say if it's not Jan or whatever, but I can also filter things by state if that's why the payouts are different for publishers. That happens a lot. A lot of times when you're paying by state, because your buyers are paying you differently by state, you would use this pay a percentage and just tell, you can tell them whatever, hey, I'm giving you 75%, and that's on paper, but then you actually set it to 60. It doesn't matter, they don't know what you get paid. But if you want to pay people on a rev share, lots of publishers will allow for that. So that is how you set up the different payouts. Again, normally it's 24/7 across the board, and if you did have to, you had multiple publishers and you did have most of the people get paid 24/7, but one of your publishers needs to be paid on a split time, it'd be very difficult to do in here. And it's probably easier to do that in traffic source capping, not really cap the person, but be able to set up the cap rules during the times they have the different payout. So that's typically where I do the custom hours of the day payout for a traffic source. I would do it in the traffic source capping so I can leave this box 24/7 and handle any traffic source if it was only an individual traffic source that had different payouts at different time of the day. Now if all your traffic sources have different payouts at different times of the day, fantastic. Put in different payout settings. It'll create a new box with different times, and you can work with it that way.